I'm a massive basketball fan. And I always have, in the back of my head, I could be a basketball coach one day. Why not? I watch a lot of basketball. Sometimes I read biographies of basketball players. It's a whole thing. So if I want to become an inspiring basketball coach, and let's forget about the science behind the game of basketball. Let's say I study that, but I'm a first time coach, first time leader. What advice would you give me?
I love basketball as well, and I like these kind of sports analogies and comparisons. So maybe we can talk about that more fundamentally. First, why do we, and when I say we, I would say, the business, management, professionals, why do we love the sports stories? And I think one of the reasons is that in sports, it's so easy to measure performance, right? Like, because somebody wins the game, and we can tell by how much. And individuals score a certain number of points and get a certain
Nice and
number
easy,
of
yes.
rebounds
Just
and a
how we
certain
like
number
it.
of assists, right? So it's all very quantifiable. Yeah, exactly. So like the Chicago Bulls, I would say, but maybe now we're getting into trickier terrain. I would say the greatest basketball team of all time in the Jordan era, right? Six championships in a decade. So what can you do as a coach to make that happen? There's the whole strategy dimension, right? Setting up the right plays, having people pass in the right places at the right times, etc. I think it's an underlooked aspect would be choosing leaders, choosing captains, that is, who are not just high performers themselves, but who elevate the performance of everybody around them. And so while we're on the Bulls here, Michael Jordan, when he joined the Bulls in the early 80s, he was already an absolute rock star from day one. I mean, people were watching him. He was one of the best from the first day he played. But the Bulls, didn't make it very far. And then Phil Jackson joins. And one of the changes he makes in the first season, when the Bulls really take off, is he he nominates or appoints a co-captain with Michael Jordan.
Ouch.
Now, there are very few teams who have two captains, right? It's usually one guy and it's the highest scorer, or like the most, the highest performer.
The superstar, yeah.
And a superstar, exactly. So first of all, to appoint a co-captain with Jordan, that goes against the grain of coaching, right? And who does he appoint? He appoints Bill Cartwright, who is a player who's well past his prime, has terrible knee problems, is not really a good basketball player anymore. However, Cartwright is really good at relating to everybody on the team, right? He's the guy who kind of understands everybody, talks to you after practice, makes you feel better, appreciates everybody. Something which Jordan is not good at. Jordan is good at making people work hard and feel bad for their mistakes. And this combo of, the drive, the performance-oriented captain with the guy who's really empathetic, really humble, really caring, that's the magic recipe there. That is one of
So Cartwright was actually doing things we wouldn't see when watching the game.
Exactly. What you see when you're watching the games is Cartwright fumbling the passes and
Jordan killing it.
Exactly. But if you read the kind of statements from players at the time, when Cartwright is appointed co-captain, the atmosphere changes like that. There's just a new feel in the team. And they start this winning streak, and the rest is history, as you say. And even Jordan, at the end of his career, said, "Bill made all the difference."
Wow, yeah. I didn't know that. I thought you were going to go the other way, that you're going to be like, okay, he needed a Scottie Pippen to be his, like they say, the Robin to his Batman.
Well,
so this is
absolutely. I mean, really now we're getting into the details, right? And that's why I say there's more to it than just the co-captain. I mean, if you appoint Bill Cartwright co-captain in a team that has no talent, that's That's not going to help them win enough games to make it to the championship. There's Pippen, you're right, the wingman. I think another interesting aspect that also speaks to Phil Jackson, the coach of the Bulls in this period, is Dennis Rodman, right? Dennis Rodman,
My favorite. Yeah.
people love him or hate him, right? And if you don't know basketball, Dennis
The Worm.
Rodman,
What a legend.
he was this, if you don't know who he was this outsider, right? He got into fights, not just with the opposing teams, but with people on his own team, with the coaches. He had this colored hair. He looked a bit like a thug, or, not like your traditional basketball player in the 90s. He's running afoul of everybody, the league, his coaches, teammates, and Phil Jackson, the coach of the Bulls, says, we need him. And managed to integrate an outsider like that who had never been accepted for who he was, integrate him as a core member of this Bulls team. And I think that speaks to the mentality and the empathetic abilities of Phil Jackson as a coach.
So what does this tell us about Phil Jackson as a leader? Like what did he see that the rest of the coaches or the rest of the league didn't see? Specifically in regards to these two examples of Bill Cartwright and Dennis Rodman. Is it empathy or is it more than that?
It's definitely more than that, and that's where I think we really have to be careful, right? Like, you also need the right strategy. You need to call the right plays. You need the right kind of behavior and training. You need to do the right drills. You need the right high performers, and you need the right rebounders. And so there's so many pieces, right? And I think that's true in leadership out there in the corporate or political world as well, that there's never just one thing that you need. That's a bit the danger, right? When we look at an example, we're like, wow, what a great communicator. If I could only communicate like that, I would be as successful. That's probably not true, right? A lot of things are required, and what's required depends on the circumstances, right? But yes, I would say one of the things that set Phil Jackson apart from other very successful coaches of the time, who also were, master strategists and had great players on their team, etc., was his empathy, right? His ability to make every player feel seen and appreciated, um, appreciated for the strengths and the weaknesses that they had and that they brought to the table. They functioned as a team in a way that other teams didn't, and I think that starts with good leadership. And maybe, while we're on the subject, I said I also love kind of these sports comparisons. I know, here in Europe, a lot of people always talk about soccer, football. I think the danger when we extract such wisdom to business or politics is that what is fundamentally different about sports is that the rules don't change. What I mean by that is, if you show up to a basketball game, you're only allowed to field 5 players at a time. You know how long the quarters are. You know how many points you get. You get 3 if you shoot from outside the arc. You get 2 if it's on the inside. Right? These things are all known. So in terms of strategy and preparation, there's a lot more you can do, kind of specific steps you can take to get ready, and a lot of eventualities you do not have to account for, right? There's not suddenly going to be 3 balls in play. You don't have to practice that. That's not going to happen. It's just 1 ball at a time, right? You're not suddenly going to be allowed to kick the ball, so you don't have to plan for that or practice that, right? And in let's say non-sports areas of leadership, in business or in politics, there are very few rules that are truly fixed. You can make assumptions about stability around regulations or around how your competition is behaving, etc., but nothing is fixed, and it can change overnight. And that makes it, I think, much more daunting than being the coach of a basketball team.
Okay, last narcissistic swing back to my career as a basketball coach. So if we could put it in some sort of bullet point list, I need to be competent if I'm starting out as a coach or any kind of leader. I need to be a good communicator. I need to have some empathy. Is there anything else that I forgot about?
Well, let's see. I mean, yeah, you need to be competent. You need to understand the game of basketball really well, right? And this is actually also true in a lot of business realms. There's a great book by Amanda Goodall, who's a leadership scholar in the UK, that shows that these kind of you know leaders with strong domain expertise tend to perform better in leadership roles than outsiders. So doctors make the best hospital administrators, um, right? Better than some kind of former consultant who comes in and shakes things up but doesn't really understand medicine. And she also speaks of sports, that the best coaches were not necessarily the best players themselves, but are intimately familiar with the game. And I think that makes sense, right? Because again, context is so important, right? And if you don't really understand all the drivers, all the little details behind the scenes that are not visible to the spectator, then it's very hard to make good decisions and kind of pull the right levers. So yeah, you need to be very competent in the realm of basketball. You need to be a good communicator. You need to be empathetic and humble. And then I think there's I think we could think of leadership really as having this toolkit. You need to carry a toolkit around with you, and depending on the circumstance, you need to pull out a different tool, right? So I think there are times when the right thing to do is to kind of change things up to signal that we're starting anew. But there are other times where staying the course, despite the fact that everybody thinks it's not going to work, is the right decision, right? So it's really hard to get into these general truths, I think, around leadership. So maybe being adaptable, being able to select the right tools to use in the right moments is another one I would put on there. Yeah. And then maybe what I would also say is, this maybe goes back to the competent bit. I think being willing and able to practice the fundamentals is key. Maybe we can circle back here, move from basketball back to polar exploration again, where we started. Right at the end of the day, your basketball team, you have to be able to box out better than your opponents, so you can rebound better than your opponents, right? You have to be really good at dribbling, right? And even though these are professional athletes, these are things you just gotta practice relentlessly with them, right? Even if it's boring, even if it's not the most exciting thing to do. And that's something we see in the great coach as well. And now if we transition to polar exploration, Amundsen, this very successful Norwegian explorer, I mean, he selected men for his teams who could ski, who were expert skiers. And even so, they spent a long time practicing skiing together because that afforded them really good mobility. He also adopted, dog sledding from the Inuit. Again, not, let's say, a European way of moving across the ice. And they spent a lot of time practicing that as well, kind of optimizing the sledges and the harness system for the dogs, etc. A lot of the members of the British expeditions don't know how to ski, right? And the few skis they have not been,
again, respect for their courage.
Exactly. But I think the parallel there is to like, if we want to stick to basketball, is if you want to be a good basketball team, like the basics: dribbling, shooting, rebounding, boxing out. Make sure everybody can do this really, really well. And if they can, it's not going to stand out. But if they can't, it will.
Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, follow and rate on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Every marketing tutorial out there insists it's really important that I hassle you about this, so I'm doing it right now. Also, if you'd like to, please support me on Patreon. This is a one-person podcast, as I always say. I do everything by my little old self. There's no team behind me. It's very sad, I know, but you can help by hopping on Patreon and finding the Smart Cookies podcast on there. And then last but certainly not least, as always, I have to thank my existing patrons. Tovarishin Tovarishice, absolute legends. Without you, there would be no Smart Cookies, which makes you actual producers of this show. So eternal thanks goes to Amy Jonc, Matija Renčel, Florian Hauer, Peter Karba, Matija Zupančič, Dejan Žolnir, Derej Rok, Tržan, Saša Vipatnik, Neven Cvijanović, Juš Premrov, Sirkezi, Goran Ivašič, Anže Sever, Ole, Marin Ferrara, Aljaš Mahar, Štrole, Ajda Mancian, Miha Medved, Medinjo, Goran, Gordon, Lorenzo, Jurečuk, Mila, Carmen Veronica, and Tai Chi. I am deeply touched, so thank you very much.